Every year, retail crime costs the UK economy billions of pounds, but behind these staggering figures is a complex web of organised theft, sophisticated fraud networks, and evolving criminal tactics that traditional security measures struggle to combat. The UK OSINT Community is bringing together 5 leading experts from across the retail crime landscape, from loss prevention specialists to facial recognition investigators, from risk managers to frontline security, to dissect the root causes of this escalating crisis and explore the innovative solutions being deployed to fight back. This is more than just shoplifting. We're talking about the coordinated criminal enterprise that exploits vulnerabilities in our retail ecosystem, threatening not just our profits, but the very fabric of the high street and communities. We'll be going behind the scenes of retail crime, uncovering the challenges facing our industry and the strategies being developed to protect businesses and consumers alike. Welcome to the UK OSINT Community's expert roundtable on retail theft and fraud. I'd like to start by asking, how has retail crime and retail crime prevention changed during your careers? Tim, I'll start with you.
Well, that's an interesting topic because I am asked this question a lot. And I think technology has started to paint the way forward, which really then changes the landscape for retail because you've got those that can afford technology and then those that are left behind. So now we've got a formation of the bigger, wealthier companies who can afford the technology to resolve some of the problems and those that actually can't. And so ultimately, I see the real big divide now between the smaller retailers and the bigger retailers. And I think that actually at the moment is some of the disproportion that we see between retail crime activity and the results that we're seeing quite daily in the news.
Thank you. Helen?
Yeah, I think the value and the volume of retail crime is hugely increased over the last few decades, and that also means that the investment has increased massively for the retailers that are trying to get a hold of this. Inadvertently, a lot of the investment is supporting the policing environment. We've got to be in it together, and the collaboration has never been so brilliant. I think, just every graph is up in the wrong direction, but so is the investment, the dedication and the collaboration to do something about it as well.
I'm much more pessimistic about this. I just don't agree with this at all. That what I see from when I was a young police officer is that shoplifting was taken seriously. And we can have all the strategic meetings in the world, but unless the shoplifter's arrested and put before the court, you can have fancy meetings and fancy squads, but it doesn't get anywhere. And what I've found myself is the blatantness. Like shoplifters used to sneak something into their jacket. Now they go into a shop and they fill their bag full of goods and simply walk out because they know that about 99% of thefts are unsolved. We talk about technology. But I know the CCTV evidence is simply not utilised. There's no national database of images. So if you are happy to shoplift in Staffordshire, then move to Cheshire, then go to Greater Manchester, then go to Merseyside, no one will ever link you. You will not be linked by anything. They talk about facial recognition. About 20% of the images are suitable for that. What about the other 80%? And then it's the coordination of these things. I was speaking to one of the major retailers, and like, for example, baby milk that's stolen often ends up in Vietnam. It's much more coordinated.
I do agree it is extensively more organised than people believe. I think that's one of the big challenges, is that people think shop theft is a victimless crime, whereas actually the community, the person impact and the impact of those stores is significant. And we know it's very organised. We know there are groups that are interlinked across large criminal networks. We know this goes internationally. I think that does go unseen. Psychological
safety is becoming a more talked about topic. With what the perception of crime is and the perception of how you feel working in a retail environment can be different to the reality of the factual data reported crime. But regardless of that, if you don't feel safe at work, how do you handle that when you're being data led in terms of how that allows you to make decisions, where to invest, how to invest, to get investment at all. So there's this big conversation starting to emerge about what's factual within an organisation or the industry versus how people still feel about it, and the turnover of colleagues, the how they feel working, time of day they're prepared to work, etc. So that's something that's brewing at the moment.
The violence is bad, isn't it? The violence is bad, and what I see with the violence is that you have these shoplifters who absolutely feel, in the past they would sneak goods in, as I've said before. Now they feel they're able to just go in there with a bag and fill up what they want and walk out.
I think we need to also have this balance about the police, because, I used to be a harsh critic of the police, and I still have a criticism of the police in some respects. However, they are no different to any of our businesses, where if you've got resource problems, in financial problems, you have to prioritise somewhere.
I want to turn the conversation to technology. Is anyone seeing sort of creative ways that, say, payments or technology are being utilised?
I think maybe partly due to inaction by the police, let's say, that retailers and the retail industry in general, they're investing in their own kind of departments and their own technology. So we're seeing an increase of crime centres that are run by the retailer itself. We're seeing an increase in sort of loss prevention strategy and other things like that, and it helps sort of deliver those overall goals of prosecuting high harm offenders, because when we have that internal technology, one of our jobs is to build these enormous intelligence packs where we can sort of hand it all over, and we can get some really great results sort of those prosecutions and those arrests and recovery of stock. So it's a really great thing that we're seeing these retailers invest in themselves.
Fantastic. And information sharing within local communities, within different stores, what's your experience been and how that contributes to security and store security?
You can't do anything without data. Everything starts with data. So, and that is by reports, whether you're reporting internally to provide a retailer with data-led insight, which means they know where their biggest risk is, whereabouts in the country, what store, what time, what day of the week, etc. That is where investment and resources are then deployed or spent. And that is what, therefore, kind of rounds up to being, we've got a lobbying opportunity here, we've got policing opportunity here, we've got investment opportunities, we know how to leverage the right technology. If you know exactly what your problems are, you do not know that unless you're reporting as best you can into the, whatever tool you deem appropriate for your business. Everything stems from there, everything goes up, and hopefully leads us to a more optimistic landscape for the future.
We've thought of shop theft in a really simplistic way, and we shouldn't think of shop theft as simplistic. We should think of it as complex and organised. And in the same way, we need to be using those tactics in exactly the same way the criminals are. So for me, open source is a huge opportunity, which is probably underutilised in the area.
And on turning to open source intelligence, who here has seen OSINT used successfully in the fight against retail crime, and if you've got any specific examples?
I'd say I have, with online marketplaces, especially like eBay and Facebook Marketplace. I think I'll use Facebook Marketplace as the example, because you've got stuff like radius maps and stuff like that. It's both a blessing and a curse, because there are so many people selling on online marketplaces, and it can be really hard to, you could spend hours trawling through Facebook Marketplace and trying to find stock that's been stolen. But when you know how to sort of look for the right things, it can become a little bit easier. So you might be looking for some hoovers that have been stolen, for example, and you go and look on Facebook Marketplace in the general area that it's been stolen from, and weirdly there's someone who's selling 3 hoovers, and that's a little bit weird. Who's selling 3 unopened hoovers? It's a gift. I didn't want it. So and we've had a number of cases that we've sort of successfully identified somebody when we didn't even know their identity before, because they've been a little bit too uncautious in just using their own kind of Facebook profile to list these stolen items on Facebook Marketplace. And it can be the biggest difference between not knowing who somebody is to then getting to a prosecution just because you found them through an online marketplace. So it's a really good tool to be used when you sort of know how to use it.
Great. So we've got sort of social media. I've always wondered if things like, in an age in which, you know, we have to factor in things like staffing limitations and staffing issues, whether, you know, footfall and traffic data provided by sort of GPS, if that ever factors into either the crimes themselves, people choosing certain times in the trading hours when they know that people are on shift rotation, or they know that maybe there aren't going to be as many guards working that day, and things like footfall and local, you know, football matches taking place, whether that's, you've ever seen that factor into crime or crime trends at all. Absolutely. Or whether it could be even part of the solution to preempt some of these things.
We do have, we see a sort of trend in some places where I think generally it tends to be sort of more local opportunist shoplifters who are sort of hanging around the general area anyway. They will just sort of by being sat on the high street or just sort of going around to different shops, that they'll get a general idea of when a security guard is on duty, when they're off duty, what time they take their lunch break. So we do see a trend of that sort of hostile reconnaissance, and they can use it very effectively. But we, I mean, I think other retailers use this as well, but in the crime centre we do something called tasking, where plainclothes store detectives, we will look at trends of, you know, this shop, they have the most theft between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. on a Saturday. So we will send a plainclothes store detective to that store on that day at that time, so that they can catch the most prolific offenders who are coming through that store at that time. And I think it's when you pay really close attention to the date and time patterns of offences that you can get people that are detained by security guards.
As an industry, there's one way you could really make a difference with retail theft, and that's to pressure the Home Office to measure the success of the use of images. So the Home Office in the police measure the success of fingerprints and DNA. By each force they can say how many fingerprints or DNA they've gathered, how many of those have been identified, and how many of those offenders were brought to justice. And they compare them against similar forces. So London against Manchester, Cumbria against Devon and Cornwall. They don't measure the use of images. So the retail sector has spent millions, probably billions of pounds on CCTV. And when these shop thefts occur, when people, once they've run away, the only thing left is the CCTV and image, okay? In the police, I've been around several police forces, the identification rates, I like people to go, what do you think the identification rate? So the police get CCTV, what do you think the identification rate of that? What do you think?
4%.
4? You're right, 4 or 5, 6 or 7%. So what I'm saying is, let's look at 10,000 crimes. You've got to look at 10,000 crimes captured to see the reality. 10,000 crimes, about 2% get an image gathered. So that's 200 crime. Let's be generous, 7% get identified. That's 14 crimes. And about 40% of the people identified actually get brought to justice. That's about 5 crimes. So out of that 10,000 crimes captured on CCTV, 5 offenders are brought to justice by that CCTV. It's absolutely shocking.
And what just quickly, because what I want to do is ask 2 things we haven't done yet, is ask Mike what makes Super Recognizer and what Super Recognizers does, and then ask actually what Opal does, because I'm conscious a lot of people listening to this won't actually know what either of these organisations do, because a lot of people knows and work in different fields. So, Mike, could you tell us what makes a Super Recognizer and who super recogniser internationals are?
So what is a super recogniser? A super recogniser is a human who never forgets a face. And so they're absolutely useful in policing and security. You can't make a super recogniser, you're literally born. You've got a large bit in your brain. There's no difference between male and female, we know that. And you're born as a super recogniser. And it can be used in several ways. So one is literally to spot people who are bad and thieves. And also, though, in UK, you cannot arrest somebody from facial recognition computer systems unless it's been verified by a human being. And the best human being to do that verification is a super recogniser. So they exist throughout. People tend to join jobs where their natural skills are utilised. So you tend to find more super recognisers in policing, in security, in CCTV. But what's often with the police, they're very good at counting how many pens you've had, how much overtime you've spent, but they don't use the skills of their people. So there are some good police forces. I'm working with Hertfordshire, the Met have super recognisers, Thames Valley Police have super recognisers, but the other police forces aren't using them, and they're not using them systematically. So I had a system where they would see the super recognisers in the Met, for example, which is 50,000 staff. I had 150 super recognisers. I had a team of officers who would go and see them on a regular basis, show them the images, and in an hour they could make 20 identifications. Now, the police are not making use of that skill. There's an obsession with automated facial recognition, but only 20% of images are good enough for that. So they've got to use both. It's not a case of one against the other. It's a case of how to use them smarter. And if you're a security company, well, surely identify the people who've got this skill, and then you can put them in the best spot where they can spot people. And people feel good, don't they, if their skills are used.
Steph, I wanted to ask about Opal and what the role of Opal is within policing, within the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So Opal is the National Intelligence Unit for Serious and Organised Crime, and ultimately what that means is where there's an acquisitive crime, which means there's something tangible that you can steal, like of burglary, vehicle crime, robbery, and there's an element of organisation to it, and the offenders are offending cross-border, so between two or more police forces, then Opal plays that kind of bread and butter role of supporting coordination across those police forces. We know commonly that offences can be dealt with in silo, or it might not be known that offenders are operating across multiple police forces, but also multiple crime areas. We see obviously significant crossovers in offenders using polycriminality. So vehicle crime offenders will be committing infrastructure and metal crime, etc., and the list goes on.
I'm glad you say this, because one of the things that I know about the industry, and I can really say, is because we do everything by the book, we don't take risks. And so as a result of that, something that comes along, we wait, and we wait. No, let's be an industry, a bit more risk-taking ourselves. Now, that's quite weird. People be saying, hang on a minute, you're a risk preventer. Yeah. I am, but actually, let's do it slightly different. Yeah, okay? Let's jump a few streets ahead. And an offer like that, I hope somebody's looking now going, I'm going to be a risk taker in my organisation. I'm not going to wait to just find out about it happening in 2 years' time.
Don't be second, be first.
Yeah, exactly.
So, if you could make one policy change or one change to people's attitudes in relation to retail crime, what would it be? Alex, we'll start with you.
I think what should definitely change is the police attitude to retail crime when it comes to fraud, because fraud seems quite like retail theft's quiet brother. There's a lot of it going on, but because I think fraud cases are so complex most of the time. At first glance at CCTV, stuff like price swaps, it's really difficult to prove unless you're also looking at the transaction data as well. You see that they've paid for that item legitimately, or they've paid for a item legitimately, but you can't actually see on the till screen that they've picked up a Hoover when actually the barcode says a sample paint pot. So I think police need to take a better attitude of looking at all the evidence rather than just kind of glancing at CCTV, seeing that there's nothing to prove when you sort of submit it to CPS, and then sort of closing the case because they can't see something. And we've had some really great liaisons with certain police forces that do have that proactive, positive attitude to fraud. And we've got some certain officers and certain forces that we go to straight away because we know that they know what they're doing. But then there are some other forces that will just bounce us off to action fraud, or they will just take that first glance at CCTV and see that there's nothing there. So I think police need to be sort of less afraid of fraud and look at the bigger picture instead.
Thanks, Mike.
The one thing that the retail industry should do is lobby the Home Office to make sure the use of CCTV and images is measured in the same way as fingerprints and DNA. Because in the police force, what gets measured gets done. It's not measured at the moment. That will create a national database, and you'll have a higher identification rate than 4, 5, 6, 7% if this is done. Once the police start getting measured, once the chief constable or the commissioners getting their backside kicked, they'll start kicking backsides down the bottom. So that's the one thing the industry could do. Start lobbying now. I will help you.
Thanks, Mike. Helen.
I think it's a framing of shoplifting. So I believe that shoplifting is, you can identify such a lot from those that do commit that crime. So I think if there's a focus specifically on shoplifting, that inadvertently will mean that the police and the government are focusing on knife crime, which is one of their top priorities, drugs, organised crime, vulnerability, exploitation. I think the focus on shoplifting will open up to all the other national priorities as well. So I think the framing of it could be even more positive than it is starting to emerge to be.
Thank you, Tim.
Look, I bring it back at government level. Do you know why? Because a lot of things actually are decisions are made by the government, and they're actually then the downstream effect of what we see. I would say to the government, do it differently. Yeah, go out and speak to panels like this. Get them involved in not what just are the problems, but what are the potential solutions. You've got a lot of smart people in this industry who are super smart, and I've met some amazing people all over the world, but in the UK, super smart and super switched on to this. Governments, come and listen, but more importantly, ask for the solution, because they might find it's more effective. It's quicker to reaction because you've got a lot of smart people. Do you know what? When I've got a problem in my car, I get a mechanic involved. When I've got a water leak in my house, I get a plumber involved. Get the right people and things get fixed. It is simple, but we overcomplicate it because of policy, legislation, and things like that. Make it simple, make it easy, and we're there to support them.
Thank you, Tim. And Steph?
For me, think big, think laterally, and use those people around you. I think there's so many resources and so much of a rich intelligence picture, and people with technological solutions, physical solutions, great ideas, and using all those people around you is the key.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all very much. I really appreciate you all making the time at your busy days. It's been great. I think we've covered most things we wanted to cover. As a first go, this was pretty good. So, hopefully more to come.
Apologies, I didn't realise it was so organised. I thought it was like a meeting.